Hello, dear students. Let's continue our path through the startup J Corp, the 6 steps to entrepreneurial success. Let's begin our week with M for Morph. Embrace radical change. The stereotypical startup success story is quick and linear. The entrepreneur comes up with a genius idea, introduces it in the marketplace, and customers flock to it. The startup goes from an unknown city to a celebrated company and media darling seeming overnight. The general perception of a successful startup path would be a straight, diagonal line up and to the right. Unfortunately, this stereotype is not reality, at least for most companies. 90% of startups I have been involved with or observed need to make substantial, often drastic changes to their original plan, and those changes are usually difficult to make, both emotionally and practically. We refer to these changes at this stage in the life of a startup as a morph. Most successful startups will have multiple morphs because the first one or two may not work. As the startups, morphs also are hard, and they will call on all your available resources to pull them off. They will test your level of commitment if you're only in this for your ego. If you see any criticism of your original idea as criticism of you, then you are going to struggle with this phase. If you possess a higher level of commitment, if you take the long view and want to build something substantial for yourself, your family, your employees, and your customers, then morphing will make sense to you. Perseverance is a key to morphing. In fact, it's your greatest asset as an entrepreneur and skill as an entrepreneur, and is especially useful in this phase of morph, since morphing is a proper response to failure. If you recognize the value in making major project changes rather than viewing the process as negative, you can move through failure and morph with speed and alacrity. Remember that the only failure you should deeply fear is failure of the enterprise. Otherwise, accept smaller failures as necessary feedback that prepares you for the morphing process. Intellectually and emotionally, the concept of morphing doesn't fit neatly into the straight line success model. Rather, it suggests a rough and jagged road, admitting that a great product idea with which you began the company, sold investors on, and rallied the employees for is no longer viable is awkward, to say the least, and doesn't fit into the success story you imagined. You say to yourself, "Oh my god, I'm not Steve Jobs." No, you're not. But don't fret, Steve Jobs wasn't Steve Jobs either when he started out. Prepare yourself for the Morph Phase, which is full of stops and starts, and take all the feedback you acquire in the release phase and use it to recreate your product. Morphing is not about making iterative, incremental changes, adding a feature, changing the packaging, or positioning the product differently through marketing materials. To morph effectively, major changes are required, and they are often gut-wrenching. Let's say you're a startup Mexican restaurant. You're not morphing if you add fish tacos to your various taco selections, if not enough people are coming through the door. The fish tacos aren't going to save you, even if they are the greatest fish tacos ever. This is where major changes should come into play. For instance, your Mexican restaurant discovers that customers are raving about your salsa. Your morph may involve packaging the salsa as a retail product and selling it in a grocery stores and online. It may even require you to close the restaurant so you can focus your time, energy, and money on the packaged salsa. Prepare to make major changes. To develop this change mindset, we need to examine the how and when of this morphing process. Parameters. The primary goal of the Morph Phase is to obtain significant customer traction. Exactly what level of customer traction is significant will vary, but you'll know it based on the following signs. When customers are telling their friends about it, when it's being pulled from your hands rather than pushed into the customer hands, and when it takes seemingly little effort to sell. Until you get solidly into significant customer traction, you need to remain in the Morph phase. I repeat again. Until you get solidly into significant customer traction, you need to remain in the Morph phase, working to find and make a product that customers just love. The timing of the Morph phase varies from startup to startup, but in general, it will begin soon after you release the product. You know you're ready to morph based on customer response to your minimum viable product, the famous MVP that you've just made. Remember, the goal of the MVP is to prove your hypothesis. If you do prove it by gaining a meaningful amount of customer traction, then from that point, you will want to iterate, making incremental improvements based on customer feedback, building it out from minimally viable to a more full-featured product that eventually will gain a significant following, preferably from word of mouth. However, this description represents the ideal flow, and most of the time it's not that easy. Even after a few rounds of iterative improvements and tweaks, you may fail to gain meaningful customer traction. In that case, it's time to morph. A morph implies a fundamental change in product, market, or strategy, or all of three. I'll repeat. A morph implies a fundamental change in product, market, or strategy, or all of three. Some people prefer to this as a pivot, though morph strikes me as a better term, since it connotes a more significant change. What you end up with may not look anything like what you started with. Morphing signals your awareness that the initial MVP is not going to achieve what Mark Andreessen refers to as product marketing or product market fit. No matter how much you tweak it or how much marketing money you spend on it, Andreessen defines product market fit as a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. You know you have reached it when you obtain meaningful customer traction. To morph effectively, determine the direction you should take the product. As you recall in our discussion of the release phase that you just made, I emphasize paying attention to what customers deem right with the product rather than things they find wrong. You can fix your way to a great product. Here, focus even more intensely on customer feedback and combine that with your imagination and creativity to figure out your product direction. Tesla CEO, the famous Musk, put it best when he said, "The most important thing an entrepreneur can do is focus on making a great product or service. The only way to do so is by learning from the feedback loop of the market and constantly adjusting behavior." So, it's a constant adjusting phase here in the morph. To get to a great product quickly, ask yourself the following questions. What is working for your product? What are the customers talking or writing about? What about your product attracts customers? What do customers want more of? What aspect of the product appears to address a real need or problem or solve a real problem? Once you figure out the direction, push hard toward it. Do more of what's right for your product and less of everything else. Brainstorm with your people. Write down every idea your team has, and then start winnowing down the list by eliminating any impractical, because of cost or for other reasons, ideas. The litmus test of a successful morph is customer traction. Your customers are engaging with and loving the product, despite the obvious flaws that are always evident in any MVP. Of course, they still want improvements, but that is not stopping them from grabbing it off figurative shelves. More specifically, customers are buying with less effort than you expected. Every graph metric you possess is moving up and to the right. You've received praise from a variety of stakeholders, online reviews, industry observers, executives on your supply chain. And best of all, everything you know tells you this positive trend will continue. Once you have this type of customer traction, you can stop morphing and go back to making smaller iterative improvements. Signs of a lack customer traction, on the other hand, include the following. Customers are largely negative or indifferent about your product. Traffic is not growing. Repeat usage is limited. Outside comments about your product are mediocre, or worse, or your sales aren't closing. Everything feels like a push. It's a struggle to achieve even modest usage objectives. Without customer traction, you need to remain in the Morph phase, bringing out new versions, including the iterations until one clicks. You may need 3 to 5 morphs to get it right. And if you adopt a multiple change mindset, you can morph quickly. Keep in mind that time is money, and you have limited funds. So the faster you can react, the more morphs you will be able to do. Think of these morphs as shots on goal. You keep shooting the puck at the goal until one goes in. The more shots you take, the more of a chance you have of scoring. Time is your enemy here. If you can find product market fit and get significant customer traction before their funds run dry, you will be in a difficult spot. What a morph looks like. Even savvy business people may assume that products will emerge full-blown, like venoms from a large seashell. They focus on a mature, highly successful product rather than on all the changes that led to its final successful form. As many times as I tell startup founders that they will probably need to revolutionize their original product and probably change it significantly more than once or twice. They often cling to the notion that a tweak here or an evolution there will do it. Generally, it won't. Most times you have to shift the product concept in major and sometimes unexpected ways. To drive this point home, let me tell you two stories. One, you're probably aware of Adobe, a hugely successful desktop software publishing company. What you may not be aware of, though, is that when co-founders Charles Geschke and John Barnock left Xerox to create Adobe, they intended to make printers. At Xerox, they came up with highly innovative approaches to facilitating improving computer printing, and when they left, they believed that their business required them to create both computers and printers to capitalize on their ideas. But then Geschke and Warnock began talking to prospective customers, including Gordon Bell at Digital Equipment, Steve Jobs at Apple. When they pitched Bell, he surprised them by explaining why he was happy with their computers and laser printers, but he was tremendously intrigued by the software capabilities of Adobe and how the software could facilitate the communication between computer and printer and increase the quality and capabilities of the printers. Geschke and Warnock thought were still focused on their original product concept and brushed aside Bell's suggestion. When they talked to Jobs, and he basically told them the same thing. After trying unsuccessfully to buy their fledgling company, the idea sank in. They needed to make a leap from the product idea of computers and printers to the product idea of software, which became known as PostScript. This was an enormous change, a morph of the highest order, and it was even harder because they had raised money based on the hardware-oriented business plan. It can be rather awkward to go back to the investors that you have just fervently sold one business idea or plan and explain that the original idea is not going to happen. But you have another great idea that you think has good chances. In my experience, however, investors are more understanding than expected. In this case, Geschke and Warnock made it work, and PostScript went on to forever change the world of publishing. Turns out, it was a rather large idea, as 30 years later, Adobe is still around as a public company and is worth over $4 billion. Max Lepkin and hedge fund manager Peter Thiel founded PayPal in 1998. On its original product form, it bore little resemblance to the web-based payment system most people are familiar with today. Back then, Lepkin was a recent college graduate who specialized cryptography software for handheld devices. His initial product, created for Palm Pilots, involved providing security for users of these devices. The response was good, and he helped fund the new company. Handheld devices, however, never became the corporate standard, as everyone had anticipated back in the late 90s. As a result, Lepkin revamped the product, recreating their Palm Pilot security software for the consumer market. This was Morph number one. At first, their product was designed to secure information, like credit card numbers and passwords. When the response to this product was lukewarm, Lepkin recreated it again. The new product, Secure Financial Transactions. This was Morph number two. In this radically different form, the product was able to send money from one handheld device to another. In this way, if you own a friend money, you could send it to him via handhelds and do so securely. Based on a demonstration of this technology, Lepkin and Thiel were able to secure funding from venture capital firms, and they were in business. But they weren't done with their morphing. As people began downloading their app for handheld devices, Lepkin and Thiel also discovered that people were trying to use the company's website for their financial transactions. This surprised the founders, since they believed they had created a tremendously effective product for handhelds, and the website simply provided a demo for prospective customers. Then they were contacted by the online auction site eBay. eBay's representatives were interested in using their technology to secure financial transactions on their site. The eBay representatives were persistent, and Lepkin and Thiel eventually recognized that the website market could dwarf the handheld device one. In late 2000, they terminated their handheld device product and began focusing exclusively on providing secure financial exchanges for eBay users. This was Morph number 3, but they still weren't done. People had warned Levkin that fraud would be a problem, but he and his colleagues didn't realize how much of a problem until fraud began occurring regularly. As a result, and after much hard labor, they finally created a fraud-resistant version of PayPal. This was Morph number 4. You could also argue that it was a large iteration of Morph 3. At a certain point, measuring change is a matter of semantics. Having settled on the final version, the company had product market fit. It had a product people loved in a quick growing market. This story moral isn't only that you have to create a lot of versions of a product before it's successful, but that even brilliant entrepreneurs like Lepkin and Thiel can enter the initial phases of a startup with certain assumptions about their product and have their customers disabuse them of their assumptions. Being open and attentive to what the marketplace communicates is crucial during this phase. Lepkin and Thiel were sufficiently receptive to what customers and eBay were telling them what they were able to jettison products that were tied previously to their previous passions, software, cryptography, and reconceptualize the company product to produce PayPal. How to morph effectively. Discarding your original product in favor of one that gains customer traction may sound like a relatively simple exercise, but all sorts of obstacles can impede your progress. When I discuss the release phase, I note that psychological as well as practical roadblocks can hinder a startup's ability to traverse that phase successfully. The same holds true here. Founders of startups love their first products, like love their first children. The Morph phase asks them to identify and accept the flaws in their offspring. Even more challenging, this action is analogous to giving up on the dream that their child will become a musical prodigy and allowing them to pursue an entirely different discipline. And the hyperbole of this metaphor isn't as much as exaggeration as you think. It's tough to morph, so to make it easier, here are some suggestions. Prepare yourself and your colleagues that a morph is probably coming. Think and talk about the inevitability of product change in advance. When you wrap your mind around the fact that you will probably need to leave your original product behind and create something quite different from what you envisioned, it's easier to accept when change becomes necessary. Help your investors understand that it's likely you need to produce at least one major departure from the original so they aren't freaked out when you break the news in their morph phase. Too often morphing can feel like the precursor to enterprise failure to the uneducated and inexperienced. The first product didn't become a huge hit, so an air of doom and gloom settles on the startup. In fact, failure of the firstborn is a natural part of the startup process. Think about alternatives even before the launch. They may not be the right alternatives. Customer feedback will help make this determination, but forcing yourself to consider product options early on will help you develop a morph mindset. It may be that customer feedback will lead you to develop one of your early alternatives. Even if it doesn't, however, you will be more open to the morph process than if you had proceeded with one and only one product idea. firmly fixed in your head. Be willing to bend over backward to obtain customer data. Talking to customers face to face and watching them is the best feedback of all, but you should also read comments online. Personally, take on customer service, conduct surveys, and make sure your product is priced low enough to be purchased by a sufficient number of customers. This will catalyze your major product changes. So go about collecting and analyzing the data with great energy and focus, which is a great part also of strategy. You need to go out and talk to your prospective customers electronically or in person way. Their feedback is so much value. Be creative. Innovation is the juice that will energize this phase. You're going to absorb a lot of information from customers and then creatively mix this data with your original idea and come up with something new. People has different way of being creative. Some people love to brainstorm with colleagues, others prefer to be off by themselves somewhere quiet to give their minds room to roam. Still others have their own idiosyncratic process. They need to listen to music or they follow a brain stimulation exercise to catalyze their creativity. Give yourself permission to take all the information you obtain from customers and play with it. Don't place restrictions on what comes next. You want to try out all sorts of possibilities to find the one that best capitalizes on what customers are telling you. Paul Graham, for instance, was a co-founder of ViaWeb, a company started in 1998 that created software to help businesses design online stores. In its original form, Graham's software was focused on helping art galleries go online. Graham and his co-founder, Robert Morris, listened to their prospective art gallery customers, tell them that they were interested in putting their artwork online. Instead of giving up or trying to convince their customers to embrace the future, they made a leap of imagination. What if they took the software they were writing for art galleries and made some changes so it would help all types of businesses create online stores? Then they became even more creative. Initially, ViaWeb was built for a desktop computer. The user would create a website and then upload it to a server. But then Graham Morris took another creative leap. What if the user could control the software by clicking on a web page links? As a result, they generated one of the first web-based applications, as well as one of the first application service providers. ViaWeb was eventually purchased by Yahoo and became the basis for its Yahoo store service. Act quickly. On one hand, you don't want to flail around changing direction before your current release has had a chance to prove itself or not. And it's okay to do an iteration or two on a particular morph to give it a fair chance. But on the other hand, you want to get to the next morph as quickly as possible. So don't study the customer data like a scholar, spending weeks or months mulling it over. Remember, you may have to create 2, 3, or more new products. And the longer you wait, the less strong way you will have to get it right. You want to have a tight cycle that goes from new release to feedback to perhaps an iteration or two to another morph. Repeat this process until you get significant customer traction. Admittedly, need to give a particular product more time or another round or two of iterations versus morphing to a new product idea is a paradox, and the decision of when to move on can be a tough one. Metamorphic mistakes. These are big errors that are commonly made in this phase, all of which resolve around failing to make major changes. I cannot overestimate the hold an original product idea has on an entrepreneur's mind. Terry Janik, for instance, created a healthy eating app that was designed to help people take their current diet and revise it based on the latest information around nutrition and healthy foods. When she pitched the idea, she received a highly favorable response from investors, including a well-known venture capital fund. Friends and family told Terry she was well on her way to wealth and fame because of her brilliant concept. With a tech background, Terry was able to design the app herself, and she released it using a well-known marketing firm that created a lot of buzz about the app. But it didn't sell well. It turned out that while many people liked the concept of the app, of finding a simple, fast, inexpensive way to adjust their diets so they ate better, they didn't like the adjusted diets the app created. They may have been healthy, but they were unappetizing. Not everyone wanted to eat kale chips and seafood salad. Because the app wasn't tailored to individual tastes, it failed to sell. But Terry was so convinced that it should sell that she couldn't let go of the original product concept. She had received so much positive response in the create phase, and so much funding, that she convinced herself that sooner or later the app would be successful. It wasn't, and the company folded. Terry, like many entrepreneurs, made a Morph Phase mistake. Let's start with her error and then look at other common mistakes. Wishful thinking. This is a close cousin of the create phase mentality of dreams unburdened by reality. Dreams led to wishful thinking, and this attitude can blind entrepreneurs to the points that customers are raising. They may have ample evidence they should morph, but they keep thinking that things will get better if they stay the course. Tesla CEO Elon Musk captured this mentality perfectly when he said, "I find it remarkably that I can explain the reality of a situation to people and still not change their point of view. Rather than learn from their experiences, they choose to engage in wishful thinking. Perhaps it's more comfortable than reality. It's the reason people adhere so strongly to wrong ideas." The positive of wishful thinking is intellectual honesty, and that is what will save you in this phase. So, my friends, when you receive feedback for your projects, think of intellectual honesty and stay away from wishful thinking. Believe that you are one tweak away from success. When startup founders convince themselves they are on the cusp of a breakthrough, they often focus on one small change they might make that will send them over the top. This is where feature creep occurs. They believe that if they just add one feature, customers will embrace their product. It's okay to do a quick tweak or iteration on a particular morph. A tweak, however, is not a morph. Don't make the mistake of spending time and money on a minor change when a full metamorphosis is called for. Certainty that better marketing or more money will save you. Instead of bringing out fresh iterations of the original product, these entrepreneurs convince themselves that spending more money on advertising or obtaining a fresh infusion of investment dollars will help them over the hump. It's okay to spend a limited amount of money to obtain enough customers for critical feedback, but if the product isn't delighting customers, no amount of marketing or money will help in the long run. The right product will save you, so morphing is the only alternative. Morphing is the only alternative. Be open. Morph. change your product, change the original idea. Be open and embrace the morph and the change. Hubris. It's tremendously difficult for some entrepreneurs to accept that the original product idea didn't pan out. They told friends and family about how great their idea is, impress upon investors how it should make them a great deal of money, and live with the product concept for months or years. As a result, it's difficult for them to abandon the idea and morph. It feels like failure. In fact, failure happens when entrepreneurs adhere blindly to their original product and fail to listen to customers' feedback that the product needs to change. Pride in your work is good. Excessive pride ensures that you'll cling to that product idea like a leaky life preserver and end up going down with it. Confidence in the collective abilities of yourself and your team is a good thing, but hubris is just deadly. So, for a conclusion, in startups, as in life, people are resistant to change. If that is your first startup, expect to encounter that resistance, even after reading and hearing this information and raising your awareness of the mistakes made during Morph. You may struggle to move on from your original product idea and come up with something that is more than just a tweak or a new and improved version of the original. To increase the likelihood that you'll pursue the major changes that will help your morph successfully, take advantage of this short checklist. Are you designing a new product from the original based specifically on what customers are telling you? Are you monitoring response to a morph product through the lens of customer traction? Are you seeing praise from stakeholders on every financial indicator coming back positive? Or are you failing to generate traffic and receiving consistently negative comments? Have you taken early morph steps to pave the way for major departures from the original concept? Have you talked about the possibility of other products besides the original with your colleagues and investors? Are you conscious of the mistakes that are commonly made during the Morph phase? Are you aware of how wishful thinking, one tweak away mindset, marketing, money, hubris can prevent you from producing a successful one, second, third, or fourth product? Do you do more than give lip service to the idea of a morph? Do you accept that it's probably going to take a lot more than tweaks or new generations of the product to morph effectively? Are you willing to discard the original product in favor of something that may be far removed from what you first had in mind? Said this, I hope that this Morph phase helped you during your deck, pitch, and presentation. Try to have in mind this or even mention it in your presentation that hey, we think our product is great, we're going to test it with an MVP, but if that doesn't work, that doesn't break us, we're trying some more of a second, third, maybe a fourth product, and or a whole idea change from some product to some software as a service, to some new ideas that can really help and solve your feedback that the customers are giving you. So said this, thank you for hearing me and see you in the next phase, which is model. Thank you. This was Professor Marcos Romo. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.